Thank you everyone for joining. We have Reverend David Kraemer, United Unitarian Universalist Church in Waukesha.
Thank you, Huda. So we are a small congregation. We are about 60 official members with friends. That brings us to about 100 people. And our solar journey began for us in 2017. I came to Waukesha in 2016 and learned right away that there was a strong interest in solar panels among a good number of people in the congregation. As Unitarian Universalists, one of our principles is a respect for the interdependent web of life, of which we are all a part. So it's a good fit. It's a good fit for us. So in December 2016, we sold some property that the church had owned. It netted us about $54,000. We began a process of discernment on how to use that. We had several options and conducted a process that in February 2017 identified solar power as the second highest priority for the use of the funds. Perhaps not surprising to anyone in the Midwest, paying down the mortgage was the first priority. But once we had done that, we ended up with some extra funds. We began, we appointed a committee, as we are famous for doing in Unitarian Universalism, and right away we also contacted Wisconsin Faith and Solar, Huda, who connected us with an independent consultant named Amy Tyvalkoski. Amy came and did a wonderful assessment of our site. She assessed, as Dean talked about, she assessed our exposure to the sun, our roof pitch, and any conflicting shading, and also identified the size of the project that we might be looking at, some potential vendors, and some potential sources of funds, in addition to going around the building and suggesting ways that we might further save some energy by changing light bulbs and other practices. Amy identified a system that would run about 9.1 kilowatts to cover, again, about 90% of our load annually at an estimated cost of about $27,000. We then sought bids from 3 companies, and their estimates, their proposals ranged in size from about 9.5 kilowatts to 10.2 kilowatts at a cost range of about $25,000 to $28,000. So you can see that Amy was right there in the ballpark with what actually came back from the companies. And at the same time, then we had this this process moving on through our congregation. And in October of that year, the congregation agreed to allocate $15,000 toward the project and to seek the rest from fundraising and from some grants. So we immediately put out a plea for help with the project. In November, we identified Arch Electric as our preferred vendor. Arch was at first not the lowest bid, but as Dean had pointed out, we came to trust Arch in its presentation. We were impressed by their persistence and their detail, so we went with that. And so they ended up proposing it's a 10.1 kilowatt system. There are 30 panels that was to produce an estimated 3,500 kilowatts annually. In December of that year, the congregation gave the final okay. Arch prepared the grant application from Renew. We used a Renew grant as well, and we sought to move forward. It's wintertime now, and we're going to be putting these panels on the roof, so our congregation was quite concerned that they were going to be able to do this work in the winter. Arch assured us that that was not going to be a problem, but as you can see, things took a little bit more time. In this process, it came to our attention that should we need to re-roof the building, the panels would have to come down and then they would have to go back up. The estimated cost of taking down the panels and putting them back up again would be about $5,000. So the congregation went through another discernment process to decide whether to put on a roof or not. The roof that was on the building probably had 5 to 10 years left in it, and so it was not an immediate need of being replaced, but sometime in the life of the panels, certainly it was going to need to be replaced. So after some back and forth, the congregation eventually decided to replace the roof before putting the panels up. The roofing project cost an additional approximately $40,000, which was paid for by refinancing the mortgage and throwing it back onto that cost. We had, as I'd mentioned, already paid down the mortgage, and then we brought it back up again. So there was a little bit of a back and forth in that process. And I will say, I don't know if there are other congregations involved in this webinar, but even for us, and with a very strong environmental bent to the congregation, the process was not always unanimous. And in fact, over the course of the deliberation, some individuals opposed some of the moves. And it's a small congregation. In the end, we ended up losing one family over the panels, which is unfortunate, but I want to share that because this is not always an easy process. In January, we signed the contract with Arch. In February, our Focus on Energy grant for $3,000 was reserved until, does that say May? And in April, we were able to replace the roof. Then Arch discovered additional permits were needed from the city of Waukesha. So we went through some structural engineering to make sure that our roof could carry the load. It was fine to begin with, and we're all quite sure of that to begin with, but it took some time to go through the permit process. And so finally, in May, Arch submitted the final reports to the city of Waukesha and got the go-ahead to install the panels. So Arch installed in May 2018. As Dean had pointed out, this went very smoothly. It took about a week to put up the panels. We have only 30, but they went up in a breeze. And there's a little shout out to Arch. And we used a drone you can see this is our building. This is a south-facing slope, and there are no trees that interfere with our panels at any time through the year. And then we waited. We Energies, which is our electric utility in Waukesha, also needed to approve the project, which they did early on in the plan. And again, we're sized for about 90% of our capacity. But it took forever after the panels were up for we to finally hook us up to the grid. It just seemed to go on and on, one thing after another. And finally, in August of 2018, that's our treasurer, Paul, was able to flip the switch, and we began producing electricity. So we used a $5,000 grant from Renew, and we received a $3,000 Focus on Energy rebate after the panels were put in. As it turned out, we raised about $18,000 of congregational donations. So just like Dean, we used no existing church funds to pay for the project. So the instant we turned on, we were saving money. Now, some people talk about looking for payback. We, of course, didn't have to do payback, but I also reminded people throughout the process that as we are a church, this is a different kind of a thing than with your, than if you were doing this for your home. If you were doing this for your home, you have a certain amount of funds that you can use, and you're deciding whether this will be cost effective. For us, this is more missional, and our congregation is not going to ever retire. So there's not a time when it would be the case that we would want to reduce our expenditures. In any case, it didn't matter because we had the funds up front and were able to pay for the project right away, and we began saving money. So to date, we've produced about 21,000 kilowatts of energy, and in that time, the rate that We Energy pays for, or We Energy charges for electricity has varied. Our treasurer used the lowest rate over that period of time to calculate that we have saved about $2,700 more than that, really, because of the rate fluctuation. And as with the other two, there are times when we are producing more energy than we are using, and the utility buys that back. The utility buys it back at a very reduced rate. We have laughed about this from time to time because we have gotten checks for $3 and some change, and have counted that as revenue, but it's not the same as the amount that they charge us when we are paying for a small amount of energy.
Great story. Thank you very much, Reverend Kraemer, for sharing. This is awesome. So with that, thank you very much for joining. This has been recorded and will be posted on our website, wisconsingreenmuslims.org. And thank you very much for joining, and be active. And as I mentioned, this is a really good time to share your story in support of renewable energy and solar. So let's do that collectively to inspire others and to support renewable energy. Thank you all. Thank you very much.